November 1954. Ellis Island, the main immigration port in New York Harbor, closed its doors for the last time. The first ever Godzilla movie premiered in Tokyo, selling 9.6 million tickets as the fire-breathing behemoth terrorized Japan, it says here. Ann Hodges from Sylacauga, Alabama had a meteorite named after her, after part of it hit her, after crashing through a roof and bouncing off her console radio. That really happened. She was okay, and remains the only documented case of an object from outer space hitting a person. Also in that month, in Williamsburg, Virginia, Robert and Lois Hornsby welcomed into the world little Bruce Randall Hornsby on November 23, 1954. Robert, Bob Hornsby, was an attorney, a real estate developer, and a part-time musician. Lois, a piano player and church community liaison, who the Lois S. Hornsby Middle School in Williamsburg was named after. Even before Bruce's parents, the Hornsbys had a rich musical history. Lois's father, Bruce's grandfather, Pierre Paul Saunier, was a respected organist in Richmond and head of music for the city schools. He had his own radio show playing the big Mosque Theatre stage organ on WRBA, 50,000-watt Voice of Virginia. He was also the organist for Santa Claus at the Miller and Rhodes Tea Room, a long-standing tradition for Virginia families. And encouraged by her own parents, Bruce's mother Lois spent her college years leading a vocal trio. She later coordinated local ventures like the interracial musical youth group Sing Out Williamsburg, helping them to sing and learn about patriotism, morality, and racial equality. That group included young Bruce and his older brother Bobby. Robert Hornsby played sax in his brother's band Sherwood Hornsby and the Rhythm Boys, a swing horn band playing Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller style, featuring Sherwood on piano, Robert on sax, and Uncle Charles of Spirit Trail fame on clarinet. 7-year-old Bruce took piano lessons for about a year with his brothers Bobby and Jonathan at a funeral home. 6th grade Bruce had his own band, and the young guitar playing Bruce, armed with a Mel Bay chord book, was really influenced by the Beatles and the Stones. But as a young boy, he really wanted into sports. "We were just your typical kids," he later said. "You'd rather be out playing baseball or basketball than inside practicing the scales." From 9th through 12th grade, that was basketball, and he was recruited for Division II basketball at Randolph-Macon. But by his senior year, Bruce's brother Bobby had introduced him to the Joe Cocker album, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, with Liam Russell on piano. Around the same time, Bobby and Bruce were driving on the Colonial Parkway from Yorktown to Williamsburg, and Bobby put on an 8-track tape of Elton John's Tumbleweed Connection. When they got home, Bruce began teaching himself how to play Amarina. Those albums inspired Bruce to become deeply involved with the piano. So, in the spring of 1974, Bobby Hornsby put together Bobby High Test and the Octane Kids with Bruce on Fender Rhodes piano. They were essentially a Grateful Dead cover band, but also played some Allman Brothers, some from the band. "We didn't do a whole lot of money gigs," Bruce said, "but it was more about just going out to this country house that my brother lived in with all these hippies and sitting around playing." Bruce spent a year at the University of Richmond, what he called real college, and decided that was not for him, before 2 semesters at the Berklee College of Music near Boston. He'd often be found at Paul's Mall and the Jazz Workshop next to it. Finally, he wound up at the University of Miami, as did, at other times, Pat Metheny and Ben Folds. I had no fun in college, Bruce says. It was all about playing. I was totally consumed and practicing every day. Bruce graduated from Miami in 1977 with a minor in classical piano and a major in jazz piano, and headed back to Virginia, where at age 22 he started the Bruce Hornsby Band, with John Molo on drums, Phil McCusker or Peter Harris or Steve Watson on guitar, Bobby Hornsby on bass, and Ann Hornsby on percussion and vocals. They gradually began playing Bruce's own songs and developed a loyal local following. Kathy Moore at Whisper Concerts would book them into the Cave nightclub to play 5 nights a week on 17th Street in Virginia Beach. With tree stumps for tables, the venue was covered in textured concrete both inside and out, decked out to look like an actual cave. Bruce and the band would spend their time playing the Cave, the King's Head Inn, the Jolly Ox and Dylan's, playing their own songs along with covers of Steely Dan, the Doobie Brothers, Jackson Browne, Joni Mitchell and more. The bar regular at the Cave, on spotting the band arriving each night, would greet them with, "Here come the Noisemakers." The Cave, later the Rocks, and then later the Cave again, closed its doors for the last time in June of 2019. On December 1st, 1978, the Doobie Brothers came to the Hampton Coliseum, and Bruce won himself a big fan. He took his drummer John Molo to the Sheraton Hotel with him to look for Michael McDonald, and found him in the lobby. "We are playing at the Jolly Ox tonight," Bruce told Michael, "and you should come and hear us." And he did. And he was instantly on board. He brought the whole band back the next night and even sat in with Bruce at a suddenly packed out Jolly Ox in Hampton. The next night, the Doobie Brothers invited Bruce and his band to come to Richmond as guests and to join them on stage for the encore of Listen to the Music for a crowd of 20,000 plus. The opening act for that tour was Ambrosia, where Bruce first met Joe Puerta, later the bassist for The Range. Bruce credits Michael McDonald as being his discoverer, and his support was strong. He could be seen at Doobie Brothers performances, including on Johnny Carson, with a Bruce Hornsby Band t-shirt on TV. Bruce recorded a demo tape at Richmond's Alpha Audio in early 1979, sent it to Michael McDonald, and he and Molo spent 10 nights that February sleeping on Michael's floor. The demo tape ended up in the hands of departing Doobie brother Jeff Baxter. He got the offer of a deal from a label at that time, $40,000 up front, in exchange for half of his publishing rights. Bruce turned that down, preferring to take the chance and take a gamble on himself. Others turned down the tape, but he had people's attention in the music industry. Michael McDonald's advice had been to consider a move to Los Angeles, and in 1980, Bruce got a job offer and a move to LA as a staff songwriter for 20th Century Fox. Taking drummer John Molo, guitarist Steve Watson, and later his girlfriend Kathy with him, Bruce set himself a target, a record deal in 10 years or go home. He saw a lot of interest and a lot of near misses. In 1981, Lenny Waronker, the man who signed Prince and R.E.M., funded a demo for Bruce to make for Warner, and then declined. In 1982, Bruce joined Joe Puerta and Ambrosia, and can be seen in their How Can You Love Me video. But Bruce says, we were the opposite of success, and when I didn't get a record deal, they kicked me to the curb. The following year, in 1983, Sheena Easton took Bruce on as her musical director and touring piano player, along with Joe Puerta. Here's Bruce in the Strut video. In the same year, George Lucas followed up his 3 original Star Wars movies with his first animation, Twice Upon a Time, which Bruce wrote and performed the opening track, Heartbreak Town. Bruce was turning out the demo tapes, but getting passed on, and around 1983, his music took a little different turn, moving closer to the Americana roots rock sound. His own songs were heavily inspired by stories from back home, and Bruce spent much of the next 6 or 7 years between Virginia and Van Nuys, California. And Virginia gave Bruce some hometown stories, and with them, some new songs. Combine the American roots-oriented sound and the shared and many traditions of southern United States culture and those hometown tales, fuse all those influences together and you have new songs like On the Western Skyline, The Red Plains and Wild Frontier. What Bruce needed was a band to play them. Step forward old friend John Molo on drums, bass player Joe Puerta, George Marinelli on guitar, and David Mansfield on guitar, mandolin and violin. Bruce originally was accordion only, a name what could be more Americana than The Range, not Bruce Hornsby and initially, but The Range. Perfectly represented the band's sound, the breadth of their music and their subject matter. Virginia afforded Bruce a deep well of inspiration for his songs. And so the songs and the demo tapes kept coming. It was 1984, Bruce hit 30, and the goal was still a record deal. He had some powerful advocates by now. Huey Lewis had heard him, and actually asked to record one of his songs, Let the Girls Rock. Believing he was about to get a deal for himself, Bruce declined, but Huey continued to push his cause to the labels. Still, many promising roads were leading to nothing, and Bruce was starting to second-guess his music. 10 years after the Octane kids, it was time to, literally, take matters into his own hands. Accompanied by a Linn drum machine, a piano, a synth bass and a keyboard pad, Bruce settled in his garage in Van Nuys, California and recorded what he wanted to hear. He called it the least commercial and most stylistically unique demo he'd ever made, expecting no interest from any of the big labels. On it, he put Mandolin Rain, The Red Plains, Till the Dreaming's Done, and a jazz-inflected song about social injustice driven by 2 extended piano solos called The Way It Is. Windham Hill Records were beginning a new label and wanted Bruce on board, and they offered him that deal. Bruce saw the opportunity and declined, on the advice of his attorney. The reason? His attorney had given the same tape to RCA and Epic, and in 1985, a year after moving back from Los Angeles, Bruce was signed to RCA. He had that record deal. Mandolin Rain and Red Plains were said to have sealed the deal. What happened next, nobody was ready for. Now calling themselves Bruce Hornsby and The Range, they set to work on a debut album. The Way It Is was originally released in April of 1986. This is likely not the version sat on many people's shelves today. It's something of a rarity, and includes a couple of different versions of the songs that are more familiar today. Some are reworked, all are remastered, and it's easy to spot. The front cover showed Bruce on accordion. Several of those 9 tracks were co-written with brother Jonathan. Head cheerleader Huey Lewis co-produced some songs and played and sang on Down the Road Tonight. The debut single was Every Little Kiss and almost caused a stir in its own right. It opens with a nod to, if not a paraphrase of, Charles Ives' The Alcotts. The Ives estate heard it and got on the phone. "You've used our music," they said. "Yes, I have," was Bruce's reply, and he never heard back. Every Little Kiss hit number 72 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August of '86, but people were noticing, and it made the Dutch top 40. But it was the next single that caused a real stir. The Way It Is single came out the following month. RCA coincided that with a re-release of the album, with remixed tracks and a new front cover. The Way It Is single didn't get a lot of traction at first. It debuted at number 86 in the Hot 100, and then the BBC in the UK got hold of it. Mick Vilcoach, a producer at Radio 1 at a time when it was one of the biggest music playing stations in the world, picked up the album. He liked what he heard, and so the title track was getting played on the BBC. Not just on the radio. Bruce was doing the primetime Terry Wogan chat show in the UK, Top of the Pops, and they shot a video in England. And they used The Way It Is single's piano solos for its signature sports show, BBC Grandstand.
Sports headlines. 2 upsets in today's 5th round. Brendan Hornsby gets a late winner for 2nd Division Leeds as they put out 1st Division QPR 2-1. And top scorer Bobby Campbell claims his 16th goal this season as 3rd Division Wigan Athletic.
The Dutch provided an ample following again, and The Way It Is was suddenly getting played and bought worldwide. Bruce Hornsby and The Range all of a sudden had a number 1 hit in Canada, the Netherlands, the Billboard Hot 100, the Billboard Adult Contemporary charts, and top 10 hits in Belgium, Spain, and Ireland, and a top 20 in Australia, Switzerland, West Germany, the UK, and South Africa. Bruce Hornsby, the former Octane kid from Williamsburg, had a global hit on his hands that eventually followed back to the US, where The Way It Is became the most played song on American radio in 1987. It wasn't an easy transition. Bruce was 31 and had to deal with the spotlight immediately, and it was an all-out blitz. The Range were playing 10,000-seater arenas, and yet Bruce calls it the least enjoyable year of his career. It was just too much, he told the New Statesman, such a full onslaught of attention and opinion. I never thought it was going to be that big of a deal. I thought I was terrible at all of it, and I was. The media and the reviews were effusive in their praise. The Wichita Eagle called Bruce the best new bread and butter rock and roll has had since the mid-70s days of Bruce Springsteen. The New York Times drew comparisons with Keith Jarrett. The Philadelphia News said the record warms the same sort of inner glow that those first landmark albums by Little Feat, Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt and the band sparked many moons ago. A Melody Maker in the UK were fairly unreserved also. Who is this man? Begged the headline. This particular gherkin is called Bruce Hornsby, who sings with something called The Range, and is currently occupying space in the singles chart. With a bit of luck, this might be the last we hear of him. It wasn't. In a near miss, that review was printed next to a cut-out dartboard with Chris de Burgh's face on it. The first album was a triple platinum, and in February 1987, Bruce Hornsby and The Range beat out Simply Red, New Shoes, Timbuk 3, and Glass Tiger for Best New Artist at the Grammys.
This is great, y'all. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Kathy Hornsby and John Hornsby and the rest of the large Hornsby clan out in Virginia. Kathy Moore and Bill Reed and all our friends in Virginia. RCA Records for doing a great job for us, incredible job. Paul Atkinson for signing us. Yeah. And Tim Neese, Fred Ansis, our road crew. And we've been out on the road a lot, so we see a lot of these guys. And I'd especially like to thank my big brother and our head cheerleader, Huey Lewis. Thank you very much, everybody.
And the hits continued. On the Western Skyline made number 6, Mandolin Rain number 1 in the adult contemporary charts, a re-released Every Little Kiss number 3, and Bruce was in demand, not only in the charts but with his peers. He had songs written for a new record by 1987. Huey Lewis heard one of them and again asked to record one of Bruce's songs for himself. And so this time he did. And Jacob's Ladder made number 1 in the US charts in March of '87. Huey Lewis, Clannad, Willie Nelson all had Bruce on their records, and the Range were on tour, a lot, including to Europe. TV performances including Saturday Night Live, radio broadcasts and considerable time on the road. Only one crowd got hosed down, at the Reichstag in Berlin. One side of the Berlin Wall tried a little too hard to enjoy the music from the other side as the Range opened for the Eurythmics. Those who caught the East German police's attention got the hose and were dismissed. While back in 1974, Bruce and Brother Bobby were heading a Grateful Dead cover band, Bobby Hightest and the Octane Kids, some of the Dead songs were still to be found in Bruce's concerts 13 years later. And in May of 1987, in Monterey, California, Bruce Hornsby and the Range opened 2 nights for the Grateful Dead. The Dead heard that there was this band riding around the country playing Dead songs, Bruce said, and Jerry Garcia and Phil Lesh became fans of the record, so we got a call saying they wanted us to open a couple of shows. They did, beginning in California and even included I Know You Rider in their own set. Not that Bruce was resting on his creative laurels for a minute. The second record was being crafted. Virginia continued to provide an inspirational setting, and by 1988, he had the musical equivalent of a book of Southern short stories entitled Scenes from the Southside. Peter Harris replaced David Mansfield on guitar, and in May of '88, the new album was released. It was a concerted effort to document the Tidewater area in the words of Bruce and Jonathan Hornsby, not just rooted in their own experiences but borrowing from Southern literature. The Road Not Taken was inspired by Lee Smith's 1983 novel Oral History, set locally. Look Out Any Window was a commentary on environmental degradation and corporate greed. Old Playground about his time on the basketball court. The show goes on about small town gossips. These were, in a literal sense, scenes from the South Side, stories from southeastern Virginia. It went platinum, made number 5 in the Billboard 200 and the top 20 in Australia, Germany, New Zealand, Sweden, Switzerland and the UK. Valley Road was the biggest hit, a song about class differences, a local poor boy, rich girl plantation romance, and the subsequent pregnancy that Bruce said happened every year in his hometown. It set radio history by being picked up by a record-breaking 186 stations in its first week. Video was a very funny documentation of all of Bruce's local friends and family in a gym, including Dad Robert Hornsby playing a non-existent clarinet solo. Then in June of '88, weeks after Scenes from the Southside was released, the Octane Kids sat in with the Grateful Dead. After the Range opened for them in Buckeye Lake, Bruce played accordion in the first set on Sugaree and Memphis Blues. It would not be the last time. Meanwhile, Bruce Hornsby and the Range took off on the road again, taking in North America and a return to Europe, including a broadcast for BBC Radio 1. Bruce had also been writing some more, but not only for himself. He credits Don Henley as the first big shot who asked him to write a song. Henley called Bruce up, came over to his house, and they were friends from the off. Bruce had written some music that he couldn't yet find the words for, and he offered it to Henley. He gave him a tape. Henley listened to it in the car on the way home and called Bruce there and then. He was in, and End of the Innocence was written. Henley put the words to it right away. Bruce played piano on the song to Henley's vocals, which became the title track to his 1989 album. The single got a Grammy nomination and made number 8 in the Hot 100 and number 1 in the mainstream rock charts. Fun fact, the End of the Innocence video was directed by David Fincher, who later directed Alien 3, Fight Club and Seven. Bruce was in demand in 1989. As a young adult, he'd been turned on to the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band by younger brother Jonathan, a big bluegrass fan, and was a big fan of their record Will the Circle Be Unbroken. So 17 years after the first volume, he was invited to join them for volume 2. Bruce was inspired by Leon Russell's reinventions of his classics into a breakneck bluegrass version, and he gave Valley Road the same treatment for the Dirt Band. He was greatly struck by the looseness of the whole project and the live approach to it, which was minus the typical studio post-production and overthinking of a song. It was one and done. The end result won Bruce his second Grammy for Best Bluegrass Recording. And bluegrass had a big say in his music at the time, playing the famous Telluride Bluegrass Festival for the second time in June of 1989, playing with the Dirt Band's Jerry Douglas and Mark O'Connor, the Newgrass Revival, Bela Fleck and Paul Brady. Bruce and the Range managed to get Charlie Parker's Au Prévave into a bluegrass festival, along with some Rolling Stones, Wild Horses, and some Beatles, I've Just Seen a Face. Bruce was earning himself a reputation of one of the hardest working artists around, and he was also guesting with the Grateful Dead on accordion and keyboards, notably at RFK Stadium in DC. All the while, the third record was being worked on. Bruce was really aiming for the live sound that he'd so enjoyed with the Dirt Band, which was even reflected in the title, and Night on the Town was released in May of 1990. With a stronger element of jazz and bluegrass and guitar, this one featured a number of guests including Laura Creamer and Sean Murphy, Bela Fleck, Wayne Shorter, Charlie Hayden and the Grateful Dead's Jerry Garcia, and emerging artist Sean Colvin. Mirroring Bruce's encounter with Michael McDonald, Sean had found Bruce at a Grateful Dead tribute gig a couple of years beforehand, gave him a demo tape, and Bruce called her the very next day. He was a vocal supporter of Sean's before she got a deal, and by 1990 she appeared on A Night on the Town courtesy of Columbia Records. She provided backing on 3 songs, Barren Ground, Special Night and Stand on the Mountain, and duetted with Bruce on Lost Soul, a song he originally wrote for Emmylou Harris. Elton John, a huge inspiration of Bruce's, has performed that song himself, including with Bruce at Madison Square Garden. Having Jerry Garcia on the record was a big moment for Bruce, and he played on both Barren Ground and the record's big hit Across the River. That song made the top of the Billboard album Rock Tracks and 18 on the Hot 100. The Rolling Stones review was lavish. Who could have predicted, they asked, that a musician from Williamsburg, Virginia would sit at his piano and coax jazz, rock, country and gospel into a vibrant, instantly recognizable sound that would inhabit the lives of millions of people. Along with the record came a video release, a VHS tape, DVD and Laserdisc, recorded at the Paramount Sound Studios in Los Angeles. Joining Bruce and the Range again were Jerry Garcia, Sean Colvin and Bela Fleck, and this time Joe Henderson, Jimmy Wood on harmonica and former Range member David Mansfield. Bruce continued to be sought after by his contemporaries. The same year, in 1990, Bruce appeared on Under the Red Sky for another big influence, Bob Dylan, and with the range, participated on 2 tribute records, again dating back to 2 musical titans who had a tremendous impact on Bruce. Dedicated for the Grateful Dead, where they contributed Jack Straw, prompting 32 years and counting of requests for that song at his concerts. Also, an angular, more jazz version of Madman Across the Water was a standout on the Elton John tribute project, 2 Rooms. Elton is another who's been a strident champion of Bruce's work and has gone as far as to call him one of the best pianists, if not the best, out there. His piano playing, Elton says, is sublime. It's perfection. 2 Rooms and Dedicated came out the following year. The same period marked a couple of milestones in Bruce's career. Madman Across the Water was to be the last recording by The Range as they went their separate ways in 1990. In the same year, the Grateful Dead family suffered a profound loss. Shortly after their summer tour, their keyboardist Brent Midland passed. Almost immediately, Bruce was asked to fill in. He told the Wall Street Journal, "The morning after Brent died, I was in Seattle. Someone came up to me on the street, and Brent hadn't been gone 9 hours, and someone came up to me and said, 'Hey Bruce, are you joining the Dead?' It was so insane." The next week, Garcia and Phil Lesh came to Bruce's show in Concord, California, and extended the invitation in person. He committed temporarily. Bruce says, "I told them if you guys had caught me 4 or 5 years ago, I'd have said unequivocally yes. But I've got this thing going pretty solidly on my own, and I'd like to continue to do that. But if you need me to help you out in some way, I will." After opening and guest appearances and sitting in even a couple of weeks before Brent's passing, the one-time Octane Kid was touring as a part-time member of the Grateful Dead. He was in the deep end. His first show was less than 2 months later at Madison Square Garden with no rehearsal. At the time, Bruce said he knew about 30 or 40 of the Dead songs, meaning that he didn't know about 130 of the Dead songs. Still, he was busy, guesting on records for Bonnie Raitt, Bob Seger, Squeeze, and a performance at the Guitar Legends Expo in Spain, because why not, with Roger Waters. And he co-wrote Go Back to Your Woods with Robbie Robertson. He learned a lot from them, watched their creative process, and together with brother Bobby Hornsby, they made a radical change. Bobby built him a custom recording studio at home. Bruce was a new dad to twin sons Russell and Keith in 1992, and working from home, he was free to work at his own pace. Rather than book a time frame to record or work to deadlines, or spend time assembling and pulling down kit or travel, Bruce could cross the path from his house to his home studio in seconds. Instead of paying for time which he'd have to use, he'd have all the time in the world, and if he needed to stop or take a walk or see his new family or take a breather, he was unrestricted to do that. Conversely, if he was moved to put something down at short notice, he could. Not that he sat on his hands, 1992 gave him a chance to work with another one of his heroes, Leon Russell. Rolling Stone magazine wanted to work with Bruce and Leon on an article on musicians and their mentors, and they flew Bruce out to Leon's home in Hendersonville in Tennessee. And Bruce offered him some support. It was 10 years since Leon's last record, and Bruce said to him if he ever wanted back on the horse, he'd do whatever he could to help. Leon thought about it, took him up on it, and found himself with a record deal with Virgin. He pulled in Bruce's help in co-writing and co-producing, and also borrowed Bruce's Stranded on Easy Street from the Night on the Town album.
Anything can happen right here and now. From the very bottom to the highest cloud. Just keep believing and loving strong. Anything can happen.
All of that aside, Bruce still found time for another Grammy and to get disqualified from another. 29.5 was written for NBC to use during the 92 Olympic Games. It was a collaboration with Branford Marsalis. What it wasn't was commercially released, so it didn't pass the Grammy rules. It existed only on a Coca-Cola sponsored promotional CD for the Olympics. To date, that's the only time Bruce has shared a CD with all of Tina Turner, INXS, and DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. It was released eventually as Barcelona Mona on the B-side of Talk of the Town, and won the next year's Grammy for Best Pop Instrumental Performance. Bruce continued full-time with the Grateful Dead until March of '92, although he continued to sit in with them when the opportunity arose. It's sometimes said that that environment and tenure encouraged the improvisatory approach of his music and his concerts, but really, his jazz education had prepped him for that. But it meant that he was absolutely at ease with the band. Certainly they encouraged his ventures into different musical directions which continue to this day. Travelling with Garcia and daily interacting with a walking encyclopedia of music freed Bruce to pursue other directions in his work. Bruce says, "I would hold their songbook up next to anyone from the rock era on. Garcia's songs with Robert Hunter sound timeless, like they could have been written 150 years ago. I was really influenced by that. Once I started playing with the Dead, I think it definitely opened me up." That open approach, which was hardly absent in the first place, was clear and prevalent, both live and in the new home studio. Harbour Lights didn't so much open the door to a looser and freer approach as kick that door down. The fourth album was the first without the range and the first recorded at home. The band was essentially a trio with guests, Jimmy Haslip on bass and range member John Molo on drums, joined by Pat Metheny, Branford Marsalis, Bonnie Raitt, Phil Collins and Jerry Garcia, and for the first time, three who had become members of Bruce's touring band, John Dirth, Debbie Henry and Bobby Reed. The record was bookended by an extended piano solo at the beginning, an extended guitar solo from Garcia to close. Subject matter was again of a local flavour but even more personal, notably Fields of Grey, written for his newborn twin sons, and China Doll for his wife Kathy. Cultural commentary is distinctive, like in Talk of the Town, a song about interracial romance, and the environmentally conscious Tide Will Rise in Pastures of Plenty. Local narrative abounds in Bruce's short stories throughout his work, here, before and since. Bruce spent a lot of time on the road in '93 and on TV. Austin City Limits, Larry King, Letterman, VH1 Center Stage, Good Morning America, Farm Aid, and countless radio broadcasts and another tour of Europe. Such a frenetic period which could be summed up in 1 week. Bruce was in Rome, Italy on tour in mid-June, flew to DC to appear at an Arthur Ashe tribute on TV on June the 20th, then flew back to London, got off the plane and onto the stage and played a show for BBC Radio 1 on June 23rd. June 25th, he was back in DC to play with the Grateful Dead at RFK Stadium. Over 60 shows over the summer in 7 countries. It was a continuous cycle, write, record and tour, and not necessarily one at a time. John J.T. Thomas, formerly of Captain Beefheart, had signed up by now, who Bruce calls the best keyboard player in the band. Nearly 30 years on, he's still there. By this time, Bruce and his band were so loose on stage that they were playing entirely without a set list. They'd been inviting requests, which could sometimes be more accurately called challenges or even dares, since 1990, when they toured with the Cowboy Junkies. One of the Junkies took ill, the band couldn't perform, so Bruce and his band took their set. With the whole night to fill, for the first time they took requests, and it became standard practice. The audience could write or shout out what they wanted to hear, anything from an obscure cover to a medley. They were an advantageous way to test the band, encouraging them to make decisions in the moment and play accordingly. There was no room for rehearsal or even discussion. Led by Bruce or the audience, they would find a way to seamlessly link these disparate songs together, all while on the stage, and by following various cues, hand signals, nods of the head, or subtle gestures or winks. If you didn't know the song, wing it. It's a required characteristic in Bruce's band, the ability to rely on your wits and play in the spur of the moment. He'd call it music in the present tense. It's totally unplanned. Even Bruce's own songs, especially Bruce's songs, weren't exempt from an unplanned makeover right on the stage. Bruce might not have seen it coming until he saw it scrawled onto a piece of paper, but suddenly Talk of the Town might turn into the Jackson 5's ABC, or Spiderfingers turns into That's the Way I Like It, which becomes Disco Inferno, which becomes Staying Alive, which becomes Rock the Boat, which becomes Will It Go Round in Circles, which becomes Sex Machine, which becomes Spiderfingers, all in the space of 6 minutes. And yes, that really happened in Dundee, Oregon. The studio record is just the foundation. The song evolves in the concerts and the years to come. Listen to how Valley Road or Rainbow's Cadillac have evolved and grown since their release. And it's easy to chronicle that evolution. Bruce has allowed recording of his concerts since the beginning, and there's a prolific community who does just that, exactly the same as the Grateful Dead's tapers. Those tapes would be shared freely through trading, and with the internet taking off, people were posting their tape lists and offering cassettes to trade. Even the process has evolved over the years. Once upon a time, a recording might be interrupted by the cassette tape reaching its end, or the taper either switching tapes mid-song or trying to anticipate where the song might end. Not an easy feat for a Bruce Hornsby concert. The generosity of Bruce and countless bands have allowed us to enjoy the musical evolution of their work. And we've heard some singular moments, special musical guests, rare covers, or a fight at a solo concert during Darling Corey where the taper's neighbour wouldn't stop chatting, all documented on tape and commentated on from the stage. These days concerts are recorded and distributed digitally, always for free, usually on the internet. Bruce has released a number of his concerts for free and commercially at brucehornsbylive.com. Back in 1994, after a lengthy tour and a short break, work began in January on recording for a fifth album. The same month, Bruce was in New York inducting his friends the Grateful Dead and a cardboard cutout of Jerry Garcia into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. On the road, Bruce returned to the University of Miami with Molo, playing with the student orchestra on a number of arrangements of Bruce's songs. At home, well, Bruce is never one to sit still. 1994 saw him turn 40, and while for some artists that's a nice time to sit back and look on a successful career, Bruce was typically creatively restless. Now was the time he decided to recommit to his instrument. He rededicated himself to the study of the piano, to learn it afresh. The complexity of his playing and his playing ability hit a whole new level. What could be more flexible than a band who took requests and traded off each other instinctively and impulsively? Well, if that band was a left and a right hand attached to the same brain, but split to act independently of each other. And that's what Bruce trained himself to do. He calls it splitting his brain, where both hands are doing different things. Two-handed independence. Bruce was after virtuosity. The Deadheads had a name for it too, Spiderfingers. Molo caught onto the name, fed it back to Bruce, and so it became the opening track of the fifth record, Hot House. Spiderfingers is written all about the technique and even references prestidigitation, a sleight of hand used by a performing artist to entertain. Bruce can count himself amongst artists such as Philo B and MC Zappa who've used the word prestidigitation in a song. Bruce hired a new bass player around this time. He took J.V. Collier with him to Woodstock, where they sat in with the band at the Woodstock '94 festival. JV is one of the most sought-after bass players of his generation and includes amongst his collaborations Frankie Valli, Herbie Hancock, Benny King, Gladys Knight, and the Pointer Sisters. Always, always with a smile, JV is as fun to watch as he is to listen to, and he's managed to keep up with Bruce for 28 years to date, remaining with the band here in 2022. A few months into 1995, Bruce was invited back by the Grateful Dead to join them for a few shows. Jerry Garcia's health was failing. He wasn't having an easy time on stage, wasn't very engaged, and the hope was that Bruce could pick him up in spirit and musically. Garcia was to enter rehab shortly after. Bruce's band heading into 1995 was Bobby Reed and John Dirth on horns, both Jimmy Haslip and J.V. Collier on bass, J.T. Thomas on keyboard, Debbie Henry covering backing vocals, and John Molo again on drums. That was the lineup for Hot House, once again welcoming some really special guests, Pat Metheny, Jerry Garcia, Bela Fleck once again, along with Chaka Khan and Blackstreet's David Hollister and Levi Little. The cover illustrates a dream that Bruce had of a session with Bill Monroe and Charlie Parker, and well represents the different musical directions that Bruce was taking once again. The subject matter was assorted: nuclear disaster, adultery, murder. The Dead influence is strong also, and you'll hear Dark Star in Talk of the Town, and Estimated Prophet in Tango King. The changes reflects on the Jolly Ox days. Why don't you play those good old tunes, it says. Give it up now and you could fill the room. The record was out in July of '95, and Bruce immediately took off again on tour. He was performing solo sets now, and really putting his recommitment to the piano out there for the world to see. He was travelling to Borders stores to play and advertise the record, and on 9th of August 1995, played the Blockbusters in Houston, Texas. That day, the musical world changed. Bruce had a flight to catch to Massachusetts the next day for another Borders show, this time in Chestnut Hill. That morning, Bruce got the call that Jerry Garcia had passed. Bruce did what Bruce does and played music. He kept his date at Borders and was met with a store full of deadheads looking for solace. Bruce provided it and accepted it, and the set became a celebration of Garcia. Bruce played his favourite Dead song, Wharf Rat, and talked about Jerry to the appreciative audience. The Hot House record closed with Jerry Garcia's solo on Cruise Control. It was his last recorded work. Bruce's tour continued with his band, closing with a TV PBS special in New York. Bruce Hornsby and Friends featured Don Henley, Pat Metheny, Bonnie Raitt, the Grateful Dead's Bob Weir, and a tap-dancing Gregory Hines on Talk of the Town. Shortly after, Bruce set off for Europe again, this time on a solo tour, playing lengthy shows, sometimes over 3 hours, at music halls, theatres, chapels, and Vappensaals across the continent. Branford Marsalis had introduced Bruce to Spike Lee. He directed the Talk of the Town video in '93, and it was becoming a mutually very rewarding and beneficial partnership. They both worked with Chaka Khan on Love Me Still for Spike Lee's Clockers movie, and Hot House saw a new Spike Lee joint, Bruce's Swing Street video, starring several of the then Anaheim Angels. Keep the Angels in mind, we'll come back to them in a second. Bruce opened 1996 with some extended touring, both solo and with the band. He was never far from the Grateful Dead though, and although the Dead had disbanded after Garcia's passing, their members continued touring with their own projects. The summer of '96 saw Bruce and his band join the touring Further Festival, alongside Bob Weir and Rat Dog, Mickey Hart's Mystery Box, Hot Tuna, and Los Lobos. Bruce's office newsletter in December of '96 teased an as-yet untitled 6th album. By 1997, Bruce was playing jazz festivals, solo concerts, and returned to the Further Festival that summer, joining Mickey Hart's Planet Drum, Rat Dog, Mo, and the Black Crowes on the road. In March, Bruce debuted as a pinch runner for the Anaheim Angels in a spring training baseball game, and that's a real thing that actually happened. He was there as a friend of Mark Langston and they let him on the field. Angels manager Terry Collins inserted Bruce with 2 outs in the 7th and the Angels ahead by 3 runs. Bruce was left stranded when George Arias popped out to right field to end the inning. Bruce said, "I've played concerts before 100,000 people, but my heart never pounded in my chest like today. I can't believe the manager went through with it. I ran out there and first base coach Dave Parker looked like he was going to faint. He said, I looked the same way. I'm announcing my retirement, Bruce said. Somewhere between first and second base, reality kicked in. It's listed in Bleacher Report's 15 biggest spring training publicity stunts in baseball history. In June of '97, Bruce's office newsletter teased his 6th album. And in June of '98, Bruce was out with the remaining Grateful Dead again, and he'd remained so on and off for the next 3 years. The other ones played Dead songs and each other's, and a 2-CD compilation, The Strange Remain, included Rainbow's Cadillac and White-Wheeled Limousine. John Molo was also part of the first Other Ones. Also in June of '98, Bruce's office newsletter teased his 6th album. Time on the road in the last year with Further was giving Bruce a lot of time to think and write in between sets, and Bruce would retreat to the bus to his keyboard to write. So a little later than first advertised, a double CD release came in October. The first was recorded before Further, the second after, with far less piano and more electronics. Spirit Trail, with Uncle Charles Hornsby lighting a cigarette in his ear, was yet further proof of Bruce's evolving virtuosity. With less emphasis on guests and more on Bruce's playing, less jazz, more gospel and blues, 20 new tracks, including solo renditions, made the release. Almost all of those tracks still make the live sets today, over 20 years on. Borrowed from local history again, and again from Lee Smith, her novel Saving Grace about the snake-handling churches prompted Preacher in the Ring, and the very real-life account of Chesty Puller inspired Fortunate Son. Spirit Trail marked the last studio recording with Bruce for John Dirth, Debbie Henry and John Molo, and while they didn't appear on the record, Doug Derryberry was on board and on guitar, and Michael Baker on drums. They were quickly put to work. Bruce and the band had a 2-week residency at the Yoshi's Jazz Club in Oakland, playing 20 shows in 2 weeks, 1 week solo, 1 with the band, to promote the new record. While he was there, Bruce was sent an advance copy of a single reworking his song The Way It Is. Changes by Tupac became a posthumous hit for Tupac across the world, selling over 15 million. Bruce took his band out on the road in April and May of '99 for over 50 dates, as he started to think about a name for his band after 8 years. His newsletter referred to them separately as Pantload, Spankula, The Phlegm System, and Bumby Reed and the Svengalis of Weed. He was to settle on one soon enough. Before he got there, though, he set off on the summer tour with Jackson Browne, Bonnie Raitt and Sean Colvin as the appropriately but never quite officially named Sensitive Ones, Bruce's idea. Each played selections of their own music and accompanied the others for often over 3 hours. Lost Soul was regularly played with each artist taking a verse. Bruce returned to Woodstock in July, sharing the billing and a CD for the first time with Korn, Megadeth and Jewel. Bruce's set made the TV but was sadly absent of Bonfires, Topless Ladies and Limp Bizkit. Bruce saw out the year and the millennium with a concert at the William and Mary Hall in Williamsburg. 5,000 fans joined jugglers, stilt walkers, unicyclists, mime artists and a doomed rotating stage as Bruce and his band played in the year 2000, joined by Bobby and Ann Hornsby, Keith and Russell Hornsby, and many more family and friends. Beginning in 2000, Bruce had an occasional guest play at his concerts, and it was someone well known to him. 20-year-old R.S. Hornsby, Brother Bobby's son, was an exceptional musician and guitar player in his own right. R.S. grew up watching and reveling in the excitement of Uncle Bruce's career, and Bobby took him as a boy to meet Jerry Garcia before a show in Richmond. R.S. loved what he heard from the Jerry Garcia band and was greatly impressed by Jerry, and told his dad on the way home that he wanted to play guitar. Bobby gave him his old K Electric, had it rebuilt, and R.S. was on his way to learning to play his first song, Me and My Uncle. R.S. first joined Bruce and the band on stage at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival in June of 2000, and again in Vermont, Virginia and Massachusetts, all for the full show. Bruce's relationship with Spike Lee continued, and he contributed Shadow Hand to the film Bamboozled. There was a lot more to come. And after years of requests, Bruce was finishing working on his first official live release. With a nod back to the cave days, Here Come the Noisemakers was the title, and the Noisemakers became the de facto new name for the band. This was a double disc collection of live performances spanning 2 years, most of the 18 tracks clocking over 7 minutes, and all of them reinvented. The band had really become what Bruce had envisioned hearing when he wrote the songs, especially with the connection between Michael Baker on drums and J.V. Collier on bass. He felt it was the right time to document that. He said, "If I wanted to explain to someone what I do musically, this is absolutely the record that I would pick. It captures the joyous quality of our gig." In October of 2001, Bruce gave us all a fright. Out on a bicycle with his twin sons in Virginia Beach, he collided with one of them and broke his left wrist in 2 places. The next day he was scheduled to play a solo show in Alexandria, and did. He managed a 35-minute set with one hand and one finger, sporting a brace from wrist to elbow. He was still characteristically busy in the studio working on a new record. This one had the attention and the intrigue of everyone. Bruce had been using his concerts and the internet to suggest a record with almost no piano, and advanced reviews had referenced vocals that veer straight over into Prince territory. David Bendeth, the producer and rep for Bruce's label at RCA, had visited Bruce to hear what Bruce had been working on, and his response was less than astronomical. He liked it, but he felt that it was nothing really different. So Bruce instead gave him a song that he couldn't fit in with this recent work, So Out, and Bendeth set to work on it. They both liked what they heard. The fans were getting more clues. Bruce was playing some of the almost no piano songs in solo piano gigs, and then 2 songs, The Chill and Try Anything Once, were released on the internet by his management, as Bruce urged in his lyrics to keep an open mind in these times. Did the people do that with Big Swing Face? Largely, yes. The people who had followed along for some time knew to expect the frequent departures into something different, and those new to the scene would have heard the second half of Spirit Trail with also almost no piano. That's not to say that the reaction to Big Swing Face was without its enthusiasm on both sides of the fence. The online reaction included incredible, one of my favourites, to not as bad as I'd feared, to a grave disappointment. The internet had spoken, but it's no more possible to pigeonhole his audience as it is his music, and as always, those songs have developed and are commonplace at the shows today. Although sharing a title only in Big Swing Face with Buddy Rich, it's not felt that his bus tapes have been hugely influential on Bruce, and there was little to no sucking all over the joint. Bruce had a new permanent drummer in Sonny Emery by now, who was learning as he went, sometimes hearing songs for the first time while he was up on stage. A jazz graduate just like Bruce and a creatively restless soul just like Bruce, Sonny had played with Bette Midler, Jennifer Lopez, the B-52s and Earth, Wind and Fire, and fit the Noisemakers like a glove. Fun fact, Sonny is in Lethal Weapon 2, playing on Knocking on Heaven's Door with Eric Clapton. As always, an extended tour followed the record, and Bruce and the Noisemakers were joined now and then by R.S. Hornsby, Bobby Hornsby, Steve Kimmock, Bonnie Raitt, Jeff Gerson, Branford Marsalis, Belly Dancers, Dallas Mavericks head coach Rick Carlisle, who plays a Mean Rainbows Cadillac, and a 10-year-old Samuel Deptula straight out of school to floor the crowd with The Way It Is in Hyannis. 2003 was an unusually quiet year for Bruce on the road at least, although he did join Bob Dylan and separately Bruce Springsteen on stage for local shows. Bruce and RCA went their separate ways after 18 years. The final release was Greatest Radio Hits, very definitely Bruce's choice of title, and Bruce signed to Columbia. It's an honour and a pleasure to welcome Bruce Hornsby to Columbia Records, said Will Botwin, the president of Columbia Records Group. This superlative musician and songwriter has created an extraordinary collection of sublime and electrifying sounds and compositions for Halcyon Days, his first Columbia Records album. Halcyon Days was a mini invasion of the Brits, with Eric Clapton, Sting and Elton John all appearing as guests. They'd all been staunch and vocal advocates of Bruce's work, so he asked them to put their talents where their mouths were. Returning to the piano, Bruce's 8th studio album featured some solo piano tracks and a comedic side. Hooray for Tom is maybe the only song to include the word crepuscule, other than the song Crepuscule. And What the Hell Happened is a direct result of listening to Randy Newman. Reviews were really positive from a media who seemed to be under the impression that Bruce had been away somewhere. But much of the record drew from familiar themes, again inspired by family, Dreamland for his boys, and Halcyon Days for wife Kathy. Going to be some changes made, even made a Lowe's TV commercial, hurting the feelings amongst the traditionalist community. The promotional tour included a return to Europe and a surprise as Bruce gatecrashed his own tribute band's act in Copenhagen in Denmark and stormed the stage mid-cruise control. Bruce and the Noisemakers spent 3 nights on the town in New York for a DVD, which became a documentary on Bruce, and 2 hours from a concert at the town hall. All the Noisemakers got good airtime, and it gave a terrific look at how the band play off each other in person, away from the stage. The full release shows the band rehearsal, sound check, after show, and also some footage from the Blue Note with Bill Evans, who was encouraged to do whatever he wanted. Bruce had caught the ear of a new contingent by 2005. Big names in Broadway had heard the Halcyon Days record and saw the potential for a musical. Hooray for Tom and What the Hell Happened gave them the idea, and they commissioned Bruce to work on it. And so he began with Chip DiMatteo to work on a play about a Civil War reenactor. This was a long-term project. While that was being worked on, they toured throughout the summer, often headlining with Bob Weir's Rat Dog. R.S. Hornsby was a regular guest and always to tremendous acclaim. The Daily Press said he played solos that reflected the powerful influence of the late Jerry Garcia. Bruce gave away 20 years of music for free next. Anyone who came to a solo show in 2006 got a copy of Intersections with their seat. 4 CDs, 53 songs, 4 Valley Roads, and a 22-track DVD. Unreleased studio and live cuts, rarities, obscurities, and celebrities in one box set. Where else could you hear B.B. King, Levon Helm, Elton John, Ornette Coleman, Pat Metheny, Jerry Garcia, Chaka Khan, Robbie Robertson, Bonnie Raitt, and many, many more on the same release. As impressive a box set as has been released in the last couple of years, said one review. A wonderful testament to the artistic integrity of a very important artist. And another, radical interpretations of his hits. It was a gift to the fans, but also provided musical lessons and a challenge. Bruce has always seen it as part of his role to educate those who are along for the ride. One of my interests as a musician, he says, is to be a bit of a crusader, trying to open people's ears to different things. It's been my goal to broaden horizons of people who hear popular music all the time. Bruce speaks often about asking a lot of his audience and introduces them to music they may not be familiar with. But it's never without encouragement or an education or an explanation. In London, he was asked to play Eminem to guffaws from the crowd, then did. His respectful invitation to the audience, acknowledging the bewilderment, was to open your minds to somebody truly great. An open mind is all he really asks, and if that's a lot, well, he's there to help explain. Check the liner notes for intersections and others. Bruce's press for the release included Howard Stern. Bruce handled him as well as anyone could have. Bruce released 2 CDs in 2007, 5 months apart, both collaborations. The first was with Ricky Skaggs on the aptly titled Ricky Skaggs and Bruce Hornsby CD, reworked songs of Bruce's, traditional bluegrass, and Rick James' Super Freak. It topped the Billboard Bluegrass charts and stayed in those charts for a full year. Not to stop at one CD, 2 other virtuosos of their instrument, Jack DeJohnette and Christian McBride, recorded Camp Meeting with Bruce at his home for a summer release. Reviews were again encouraging. Jazz Times said of Bruce, not only is his playing remarkable, but so is the interaction among the 3 musicians. The music stretches and contracts, it races, it gallops, and it rumbles. The spectacular setlist, said one review, included interpretations of the work of Keith Jarrett, Charles Ives, again, Coltrane, Bud Powell, and some Bruce originals, and the trio took the record out for a brief tour. Bruce returned to Miami in 2007 to begin the Creative American Music program. Feeling there was something missing in the college music curricula, Bruce wanted students to go back to the basics of traditional roots music, shape notes singing, sacred harp music, and foundations that he felt were being lost. Bruce's goal was that students would not only study the music but be inspired by it, and they were required to write and perform in that same style. He took the Noisemakers to Miami, Sonny and JV did a bass and drums clinic, and Bruce did a bunch of masterclasses on lyric writing and melody writing. The program runs to this day as one of the most renowned songwriting programs in the country. The late, great Robin Williams was to film a pitch-black dark comedy called World's Greatest Dad in 2008. What's that got to do with Bruce? Well, he was in it too. It's a music where Williams' son Kyle dies in an accident. The running joke through the movie was that Robin Williams' character is a huge Bruce Hornsby fan, and 2 goth girls are seen fighting over Spirit Trail. The movie introduced Bruce Hornsby as Bruce Hornsby, and he made a cameo in the movie, as did Kathy, Keith, and Russell Hornsby. Spike Lee was in Bruce's ear again, not literally. This was in the bathroom at the NBA All-Stars game, an accidental meeting, but on the heels of Spike asking Bruce to work for him again. Spike was making an ESPN documentary about Kobe Bryant, so he and Bruce got together again away from the bathroom, decided where the music would go, and Bruce wrote his first score. The movie Kobe Doing Work closed with Bruce's song Levitate, which is to become the title track of the next album. Released on Verve Records, the home of so many jazz and folk legends, Levitate was a landmark for a number of reasons. The first collaboration with the Grateful Dead lyricist Robert Hunter on Cyclone, the first songs co-written and released with Chip DiMatteo, and most of them for the musical, still a work in progress. The first and only song to date to feature Russell and Keith Hornsby, who rapped on Space is the Place. Snoop Dogg was sampled too on Prairie Dog Town. And this album recorded the guitar of nephew R.S. Hornsby, who'd been so popular with fans and concert goers. R.S. could be heard on a cathartic guitar solo to close out Continent's Drift. 1 week after recording that song, the Hornsby family lost R.S. in a car accident in Virginia. He was just 28. R.S. was unmistakably a Hornsby on site, but to hear him play you were left in no doubt. A world-renowned band with decades of experience behind each member changed when R.S. played, with the addition of a prodigious talent of 20 years of age when he started. RS immediately brought his own sound and added greatly to songs far older than he was, from the Dead catalogue to Bruce's own collection. He was spoken of as the next generation of Deadhead by those who followed the Dead everywhere, and brought such a significant presence with his playing and his character. You'd frequently hear people ask at a concert whether RS was there and playing that night. Behind the stage, RS was an affable and a gracious young man whose humility belied his gifts. There always seemed to be as big a commotion around him as there was with his uncle, yet he'd always seek you out with a warm greeting and a good-natured rib and a huge grin. He was as much a part of the fun off stage as he was on it, and he was hugely influential in both domains. RS was especially proud of that solo on Continent's Drift. He went home afterwards and told his mom Anne with excitement that Uncle Bruce let him play for a long time, for 2 minutes. He said it was the best recorded version of his playing. Bruce told the Burlington Free Press, "He really had the gift. He was a very musical guy and a very soulful player. We miss him a lot." Levitate was dedicated to R.S. Hornsby's memory. Eight of the tracks from Levitate were for the musical, which had been casted. Bruce's songs were getting choreographed, and Sick Bastard was preparing for a premiere at the Virginia Stage Company. 2010 was a year off the road. Bruce's one concert was a solo show in Virginia Beach in aid of the ALS Association, 11 days after the passing of Melissa Reagan Smith. Melissa was Bruce's office manager since the early days and had passed from the disease 11 days earlier, aged 43. The time at home gave Bruce the time to trawl through countless live recordings for a further representation of his music in the live environment, and so Brighter Than Noisemakers was released in 2011. These were the best live versions. Bruce called them the definitive versions of his songs at the time. Some of the most often requested songs, but also some of the lesser played songs. No Way It Is, No Mandolin Rain, No Valley Road, sort of a greatest hits package for the more knowledgeable of the fans. J.V. Collier and J.T. Thomas are the elated couple on the front. The musical got its premiere, now about a mysterious stranger coming to town. It ran for a few weeks at Wells Theatre in Norfolk in Virginia. This remained a work in progress, along with the title itself and a book written in tandem with it, and the songs, even between opening and closing night, had changed. As with all Broadway productions, though, it was all about finding the money. A workshop in New York stalled the production and they couldn't yet find the finances. It was pretty hard, Bruce said at the time, to get people to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars for a bunch of songs and a script. When you're a noisemaker, it's been said that, like the songs, you need to constantly evolve yourself and bring something new. Bruce follows that same outlook, and in 2011 began taking a new instrument on stage with him and playing a mini set with a dulcimer. It wasn't the first he'd been heard with it. He played it on the very first record, but now it was a regular part of his tour. Old songs became new again, and Shadow Hand, Black Rats of London, Valley Road and others got a whole new lease of life. Chip DiMatteo got a song on a Spike Lee joint, Him in C, as Bruce scored Red Hook Summer. That was one of 2 soundtracks released for that movie, marking Bruce's first solo piano release. And Bruce reunited with Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder for a second round, this time live. Cluck Old Hen, including bluegrass staples like The Way It Is, clocking in at over 10 minutes, and a fully 12-minute version of White Wheeled Limousine, standing out. Bruce's music around 2014 had changed course once again from the jazzier side into more folk. Accordingly, for the first time in 12 years, the Noisemakers saw a change in their permanent lineup. After 15 and 20 years respectively, Doug Derryberry and Bobby Reed moved on to other projects. Doug said at the time, "It was an amazing, life-changing 15 years for me. I love Bruce's music and I will keep tabs on his future growth and progress." Bobby Reed said, "It's been an incredible pleasure and privilege to play so many great shows with such a great band and great audience." And Bruce said of them both, "Bobby is one of the greatest musicians I know. I've loved playing with him and hope to always have opportunities to work with him. And Doug's guitar, strong vocals and mandolin playing gave us what we needed for 15 years. Thanks go out to both of these great people for their efforts and contributions, adding so much to our sound for so many years." That left some space which Ross Holmes and Gib Droll expertly filled. Ross Holmes, a preposterously young man and absurdly talented, had toured with Mumford & Sons and Cadillac Sky. His fiddle and mandolin brought out the folky in Bruce. Gibbs' playing style was discussed by Jambase at the time and read like a bona fide noisemaker job description. They said Gibbs' style is pure and unscripted. Never one to be complacent, he continues to push his own artistic envelope. Ross and Gibb fit right in. Georgi Ligeti described his own music as virtuosic piano pieces, studies in the pianistic and compositional sense. They proceed from a very simple core idea and lead from simplicity to great complexity. They behave like growing organisms. That concept of evolving music had been the blueprint for Bruce's work since the beginning, and it was becoming ever more apparent. To hear the song solo was to hear an entire reinvention sometimes, and A Night on the Town, for example, in 2014 was immeasurably different to the Ranges version 24 years prior. Bruce's objective now was to document his own virtuosic piano pieces and showcase their evolutions since their studio recordings. The Solo Concerts double CD was the document, drawn from live solo performances in recent years. In concert, Bruce will challenge his audience, teach them, make them laugh or shed a tear, and the Solo Concerts compilation is a comprehensive record of that approach. It's an authentic, accurate representation of what Bruce is about. It's not the record you bought in 1986, or even the show you heard yesterday. Etude or Study No. 5 from Ligeti was presented on the release, and Prestidigitation and Two-Handed Independence become pointillism, atonality and perpetual motion on the piano. It was compelling to listen to and riveting to watch. With so much progression, evolution and growth, why not look back 40 years? The Grateful Dead were playing the Fare Thee Well shows in 2015, doubling as a celebration of 50 years of the Grateful Dead and a farewell. After half a century, They were closing the doors and they wanted Bruce's help. He immediately accepted, and along with Jeff Chimenti and Trey Anastasio, joined the remaining members of the Grateful Dead and 362,000 occupied seats across 5 sold-out shows. Bruce was getting shouted out by now by a new generation of artists. This wasn't new. Nickel Creek's Chris Thile had transcribed Spirit Trail years before, and by now Rolling Stone magazine called him a key influence on young indie rockers. Ryan Adams had told them that without Bruce Hornsby he would not have felt settled into the idea that he can be himself without having to throw so much against the wall. Daffy Duck was deep into his music.
Soon you'll be the one dancing beside the piano as I fill our home with the sounds of Beethoven, Rachmaninoff, and Bruce Hornsby. So much Bruce Hornsby.
And Justin Vernon of Bon Iver especially had been gracious about Bruce in the media and drawing comparisons too. Justin credited Bruce as a major influence. He's recorded I Can't Make You Love Me, and Bruce was curious about this and started investigating. He loved what he heard. Justin was working on a Grateful Dead tribute record and asked Bruce to contribute. It was an easy yes and became the first time they worked together. Bruce took the Noisemakers to the Eau Claire Festival that summer, hosted by Justin Vernon, and in his key influence role ended up sitting in with the Nationals, Phosphorescent, Bon Iver, and others. That festival was a fruitful one for Bruce and influential on him too. Performing together elsewhere on the lineup were future collaborators Y Music and the Staves. But first up was Justin Vernon on Bruce's next record, Rehab Reunion. After the virtuosic piano pieces of solo concerts, Bruce had set the tone for a follow-up release in 2016 with absolutely no piano at all. He'd bought an Appalachian dulcimer in the mid-90s at a fiddler's convention. It'd shown up on past records on Shadow Hand and Mirror on the Wall. Bonnaroo had had him play an old dulcimer set, and after playing mini sets with it for years, Bruce and the Noisemakers offered an all-dulcimer record. This release emphatically focused on the song and the singer, rather than the instrument. Stylistically, it was the most similar work that Bruce had done to the first album, mandolins, fiddles, dulcimer and all. And so Justin Vernon opened the record with him on Over the Rise. This was a prolific time for Bruce, writing on the dulcimer. 4 songs came within a month, Over the Rise, and then with Chip DiMatteo, MIA in Miami, Tipping and Rehab Reunion, all in rapid succession. Closing the record, who had also been at Eau Claire, Mavis Staples, who sang on Celestial Railroad. Bruce had written the song in the early 90s and sent it to the Staples sisters through Bonnie Raitt. They wanted to record it but never got to it. And Bruce met Mavis at Eau Claire and had her sing on his own record. NPR said of it that he'd never sounded more relevant. And AllMusic wrote that Hornsby manages to shoehorn the 4-stringed instrument's limited range into 10 spirited full band tracks. The dulcimer also enabled Bruce to play his back porch trio of washboard, fiddle or mandolin and dulcimer in a live environment, and of course songs were getting reworked, sometimes on the fly. Every Little Kiss, which Bruce felt hadn't aged well and hadn't been played for many years, was called out from the crowd at the Wolf Trap one night, and Bruce, dulcimer in hand, rewrote it and played it on the spot. The same month of the Rehab Reunion release, Bruce was curating the first Funhouse Festival in Williamsburg. He'd been kicking the idea of a festival around for years and had Asheville in mind for a setting before he was approached by the Virginia Arts Festival for their 20th annual celebrations. Bruce chose the artists and performed 2 unique sets himself with the band, back-to-back versions of The Way It Is and Rehab Reunion records in a live setting, in order and in their entirety. Also appearing were Railroad Earth, Sean Colvin and Steve Earle, Jack DeJohnette, Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder, and over 6,000 people attended across the 3 days. They came back next year for more of the same, again inspired by the Eau Claire Festival. this time the running of it with a second stage. Bruce brought in Sheryl Crow, Lake Street Dive, The Staves and Why Music. Bruce and Sonny Emery did a duo show as well, and the Noisemakers played a whole set of Grateful Dead music. 2 new Noisemakers were welcomed in 2018. John Mylander from Nashville, a good friend of Ross Holmes, took his place in the band when Ross jumped on the bus with the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. Ross called John a teachable soul and therefore a great fit. And Sonny Emery, who'd been with Bruce for 14 years on drums and washboard, had always had his own projects in his own band, and he got the call to work with a Japanese pop band, Dreams Come True. So he was working arenas across Japan with them and his band opening for them too, and working with Eric Clapton. After Moise Lucas had played drums for Bruce, Chad Wright got the call. Bruce flew to California, where J.V. Collier and J.T. Thomas already lived, and between them they taught Chad 60 songs in 3 days. Both Chad and John Mylander had already done their homework and both were already great players, and they both made a seamless transition. So the Noisemakers by 2018 and to date here in 2022 are Bruce Hornsby, John Mylander, Chad Wright, Gib Droll, and the initials J.V. Collier and John J.T. Thomas. They toured from May to August in 2018, including the 3rd Funhouse Festival to date, this time including a performance with the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, and a set from Alison Krauss, Amos Lee, old band member John Dirth's trio, and the Wood Brothers. And they were working on the next record, and to nobody's surprise by now, it was very different, certainly in the creative approach. Absolute Zero featured 3 songs that were remnants of the musical Never in This House, Voyager 1, New York Times 12th best song of 2019, and Blinding Light of Dreams. Otherwise, this was another first for Bruce in the writing process. He'd been writing for Spike Lee for the past 10 years, most recently on She's Gotta Have It and Black Klansman. And in that time, he'd written almost 200 cues, up to 5 minutes in length. Not all of them were used, but Bruce was always looking for a song within them, and he earmarked some 14 or 15 of them. At the time, he was in the very early stages of an orchestral record with Michael Tilson Thomas, and the cues record was going to come later. Then he caught 10 days or so at home in between legs of a tour and, being the creatively restless type, took another look at those 14 or 15 tracks and started getting busy. In his rare downtime, Bruce is a voracious reader. Books about science or modern novels, Don DeLillo and David Foster Wallace. If some incredible writing or amazing description moved him particularly, he'd dog-ear the page, but he hadn't done anything with that. So for several months he began to transcribe some of those moments that he loved into a notebook, effectively recording ideas for lyrics for songs. So the goal became to combine these musical scores that he'd picked out with these new notes and new potential lyrics into songs. He set to work on that, and after a while had something to play for Kathy. Kathy convinced him that he really had something, and Bruce had found a new way of working. The recording process was no less special. Lots of odd instruments were used, vibra slaps, tiny tambourines, wooden toy train whistles, Bruce on drums and violin. Even the setting, JV's bass on Cast-Off was recorded in a hotel room in Boise, Idaho, along with John Mylander's fiddle on White Noise and Never in This House. This time Justin Vernon co-wrote as well as sang on a track, Cast-Off. Jack DeJohnette returned for the title track, and dating back to Eau Claire and Funhouse Fest, the Staves contributed to Never in This House, and Rob Moose and Y Music featured throughout, and for the first time, Bobby Hornsby was on a track. Robert Hunter co-wrote Take You There. "2020 saw the world interrupted, and while the concerts were on a break, the music was not. Along with so many others, Bruce worked from home and dialed into a number of TV shows and festivals to perform from his studio. The pandemic didn't put a stop to another record though. A Non-Secure Connection came out in April of 2020. Like Absolute Zero, a little over half the songs had their origins as a Spike Lee cue, and like Absolute Zero, the record opens with a string orchestra all playing one note as a drone. But these songs dealt in dissonance and the chromatic expression that Bruce had been studying. Rob Muse and Y Music returned, and the Shins' James Mercer, who Bruce hadn't met even by release day, recorded his part remotely from My Resolve. Drop in Living Colour's Vernon Reid, the poet and singer-songwriter Jamila Woods, and a posthumous appearance by Leon Russell, the Non-Secure Connection offered a diverse guest list and a production credit, this time for Justin Vernon. Press reception, especially in Europe, was fervent and wholehearted. The Times called it one of the albums of the year. Hornsby's hot streak continues. The London Evening Standard said it's not what you might have expected, and all the better for it. And All About Jazz said, if this follow-up doesn't throw in the kitchen sink quite as completely, he's still clearing plates and loading the dishwasher. As far removed as Absolute Zero and Non-Secure Connection were from Bruce's early release, they really echoed them in one striking way. In 1986, Bruce was putting together a demo tape in Van Nuys, just Bruce, a piano and a drum machine. He'd write something over a drum machine groove, play synth bass over the top, and that would become the finished product. In 2020, he wasn't using the drum machine anymore, but he'd record himself in his studio, have Chad Wright play drums over the top, JV Collier do the same with the bass or synth bass, and he was on the move. Today, Bruce is not to be slowed down by a global pandemic. As the world opens back up, tour dates will start to re-emerge, the Noisemakers will resurface, and the music will resonate once again. But for now, Bruce is not taking a rest. As ever, he's moving on. In the first 6 weeks of lockdown, he wrote 6 new songs, and he continues to pursue what he considers the unattainable, virtuosity on his instrument. In 2022, we're 36 years out from the way it is. Bruce could have coasted on that for years and earned himself a good living, but he hasn't stayed the same. That's not Bruce, it never has been. He's trying to make the music new every day, to improve and evolve, and to keep on changing.
Going out for the smoke and the trees, going out for a night on the town, going out for a look and see. Said, what made you go and do that? Well,
to watch Bruce and his band on the stage is to watch a musical conversation. Friends pushing each other, pranking each other, enjoying each other and challenging each other in a live situation, making it up as they go, assured enough in their work and each other to make every song an adventure. A story where they don't know the twists and turns until they get there. And Bruce, the lifelong student, will continue to make music that moves him, to write and perform what interests him, and whatever he breaks through with, he'll get his audience not just to connect with it, but get as stirred up by it as he is. Ever growing and ever progressing. And that's just the way a musical life should be lived.
was drawn for another showdown. Like they'd always seen and done. And one last night for a drunken old time, they left a scar on another man's son. Going out for a night on the town, going out for the smoke and tree, going out for a night on the town, going out for a look and see. Said, do what your daddy told you, Bill. Well, I just went out and did that. In the Van and Willie went out one night. Van and Willie went out. Van and Willie went out one night. Hey, yeah.
Let's see, people from the Southland and people from the North. Like a mighty army, I saw them coming forth. It was a great reunion befitting a king. Then I realized people were more important than things. Up with people, you beat them wherever you go. Up with people, and they're the best kind of folks we know. If more people were for people, all people everywhere, there'd be a lot less people to worry about, and a lot more people to get. There'd be a lot less people to worry about, and a lot more